So to be honest, part of the reason we went with Blessed Elizabetta is because her life and the readings today all fit into a nice theme. We heard about holiness and trust in God and all that in the gospel. And Elizabetta was someone that did the work of God in light of tremendous odds. Beyond equality and beyond fairness, she did even more than that. So that's the theme for today. And I'm going to start by addressing the reality of school when I'm teaching. Because as many of you know, that when I go into the classroom and we have time for questions, I'll always tolerate a few off-topic questions because I don't want to discourage curiosity. So if the kids ask me a question that's off-topic, I'll allow at least a few of them before getting back to the lesson. Examples of these questions would be, Father Justin, what is your favorite water animal? And Father Justin, why do you always wear the same thing at school every day? I guess it's a fair question. Anyway, so when that question time happens, there's always a question I'm perpetually waiting for, and no one ever asks it, but I'm ready for it, of, Father Justin, why is it that you always pay more attention to the girls than the boys? It's never been asked. Like, am I thinking about this too much, or have some of you thought about asking me that? So I am thinking about it too much. Okay, how's about that? Well, I'm going to just keep on going, assuming that some of you know what I'm talking about. I think it is true, though. I can't help it at this point. When I'm in the class, I always feel a greater need to be nicer to the girls and give them a little more attention. And I think there are two reasons for that. The first reason is just all of my good friends are female. I've always been more comfortable around girls. My guy friends have always been a little rough for me. So just simply put, I'd rather hang out with Heather and Katie than Joe and Rob. But more importantly, most of my experience as a teacher has come from my time in Africa, because I taught every school day for 2 years. So obviously that will shape the way I see my role in that. And in my part of Africa, there is a huge difference between boys and girls, because the boys have zero responsibility, and the girls have all the responsibility. So basically, the boys would have nothing to do all day long except play soccer and hang out. That's all they had to do besides their homework. And for the girls, they had to do everything. In that part of the world, the girls are responsible for doing all of the laundry of the family. They had to do all of the cooking. They had to clean the house. They had to fetch the water, which was a gigantic pain, because you had to walk a gigantic bucket to the well and then walk it back. It took forever. They had to clean the house. They had to take care of the babies, and they had to do the shopping. So does that sound fair? No. Or did I just describe your family? Anyway, so when the girls finished all of that work, then they would be allowed to study if they had the time. Needless to say, this drove me crazy. It was one of my least favorite things about that particular culture, because that was a terrible system, because everybody loses. Guys, that might sound great. Trust me, that was not good for the boys, because when you have absolutely nothing you expect the boys to do, they become just a bunch of little pukes. It drove me crazy. They were so bratty, and they were so lazy. Because they had so much time on their hands, they didn't know what to do with themselves. They had nothing to do but play soccer all day and drink tea. And they paid the price later in life when they were men who didn't know the value of hard work and didn't take their education seriously when they had the chance. And obviously, this system was terrible for the girls, because they had so much work to do. School was like a vacation from all their other work. And because they were so busy, all the girls had terrible self-esteem. Because they were so busy with their work, they didn't have time or energy to study. And they were always feeling guilty that they hadn't studied as much as they should have. So it was just so unfair both ways. And so when I was a teacher for them, I always felt the need to be stern and firm with the boys, because they needed that, and there was nobody in their life that was playing that role. And for the girls, I felt so much need to be gentle and give attention to them, because every day it looked like they were going to crumble to pieces right in front of me. And honestly, I still think like that. It's been 10 years now, I'm on a different continent, and obviously the boys here are not a bunch of little pukes. At least many of you aren't. Most of you aren't. Some of you aren't. Maybe. Anyway, here's my point though. When I am a teacher, when I'm in the classroom, I'm not interested in equality. I don't need to treat every student exactly the same, because some students are suffering more than others. And I'm fine with giving them more attention and more help. That's not equal, but it's fair. It's fair to give people help when they need it. And I want to give everybody a chance to learn something and feel good about learning something. That's how I feel about that. And I think it shows even now when I don't really need to worry about that as much as I once did. Now for Elizabetta, she is this great example of someone who does the work of God against all odds, above all equality and fairness. She reminds me of those people in life that are able to believe in others, regardless of how selfish or stubborn those people might be. So, Elizabetta cared so much for the well-being of her husband, and he did not make it easy on her. He was not a good person to be married to. He was mean, he was jealous of her from like the very day of the wedding, apparently. He spent all of their money on other people so that Elizabetta and her two daughters were constantly scraping by on scraps, kind of like what we heard in the gospel today. And throughout all of this, she was still a good wife and she was still doing work in the community. And as we heard in the focus before Mass, she got really, really sick once, and she almost died. She should have died, but she gave herself over to prayer, and somehow she miraculously survived. You know what her husband did next? He made fun of her for being so religious. That's not something you should say to someone that just survived a deadly illness. That is rude. So throughout all of this, seriously, her priest said, you should probably get a divorce. Like, that's how bad it was. And this was a time where, like, divorce was very rare. The priest said, this is ridiculous. You need to get away from this crazy person. And she said, no, he's my husband. Somehow I still believe in him, and I'm going to stick this thing out. And she made one last impression on him right before she died. And you know what? 9 years after she passed, her husband joined the Franciscan friars, and he lived the rest of his life as a priest. Like, the least likely person ever to become a priest. He had no intention to be religious. He had no intention of being a priest, and I have no idea how they accepted him. But it was because she moved him that deeply. And the connection is, Elizabetta was not interested in equality, okay? She did not feel the need to treat him the way he treated her. That kind of equality would actually probably be sinful. And she wasn't terribly concerned with ordinary fairness, because getting a divorce would have been quite fair, honestly. She was interested in fairness the way God sees fairness. She stuck it out because she cared for him and their children to the point where she was willing to undergo tremendous odds for the sake of his soul. That is amazing. So she lived her life well. She did great work for everyone who knew her. She always believed in the people in her life. She was brave, and she always left a little bit of room for a miracle. That makes her holy in my eyes and blessed in the eyes of the church.